We all know what happened to Jesus. He preached in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago and got nailed to a cross for it, kicking off a torrent of events and making a lot of people angry. The usual Sunday school explanation we hear about all this is that Jesus died for our sins, a sort of cosmic get-out-of-jail-free card that is the cornerstone of Christianity. But we here at SideQuest, my friends, aren't here for the theological debates. No, today we're digging into the nitty-gritty historical fine print to understand what Jesus was actually accused of, and, more importantly, was he guilty? To answer these questions, we first need to look at where this whole story took place, a small and generally poor part of the Middle East, then called Judea. As the name implies, it was the homeland of the Jews, who throughout antiquity had been subjugated by various Babylonian, Persian, and Hellenistic empires that ruled with an iron fist. The Jews managed to win a brief period of independence for themselves, but before they could really enjoy it, our friends, the Romans, arrived. Rome's initial policy wasn't one of outright conquest, but rather of strategic intervention, propping up loyal puppet rulers like Herod the Great. At the time of Jesus' birth, however, the Romans had shifted their strategy. They intentionally split Herod's kingdom after his death between his 3 sons. And after the eldest one proved royally incompetent, the Romans deposed him and outright annexed his territory. So, by the time Jesus was preaching his ministry, Judea was divided into 3, 2 small client kingdoms led by Herod the Great's sons and a proper Roman province that contained Jerusalem itself. As we all know, it was in Jerusalem that Jesus preached his final sermons. He arrived there just before Passover, one of the biggest Jewish holidays, which was probably the worst possible time to be stirring up trouble. Jerusalem was packed with Jews who had traveled from across the Mediterranean, and the local Roman garrison was on high alert for any potential unrest. Naturally, the city was abuzz with a variety of languages. But while the pilgrims and Roman guards had to rely on awkward hand gestures, you can master new languages much more readily thanks to our good friends over at LingoPie. With LingoPie, you learn languages by watching TV shows and movies with interactive dual subtitles. Whether you want to learn Spanish, French, German, Japanese, or any one of 14 different languages, LingoPie has thousands of hours of some of the best-rated native content out there across over 3,000 TV shows and movies. You can watch LingoPie not just on your TV, but also on your smartphone or computer. And when you encounter a word you don't understand, you can simply click on the subtitle to get an instant translation and hear the proper pronunciation. That word is then automatically saved as a flashcard, letting you review it later with quizzes and games. But what's even better, you can slow down the playback speed or loop specific sentences, making it much easier to understand the rapid-fire dialogue of native speakers. I've been polishing up my Deutsch just in case the Germans take over again, and it's been a real pleasure, far more enjoyable than any other app or textbook. And as a special courtesy to SideQuest viewers, you can get a 7-day free trial to see for yourself and a delicious over 55% discount off LingoPie's annual subscription if you click on the link below. Come join us on LingoPie and let's learn new languages so that we can make lots of new friends in Jerusalem and elsewhere. Now, unlike us, Jesus made a lot more enemies than friends during his brief time in Jerusalem. When visiting the Jewish Holy Temple, he kicked out the money changers that had made it their home. But perhaps worse than that, his followers claimed that Jesus was the divine messianic king of the Jews, who would liberate them from Roman rule. The local priestly Jewish elite, who had by far the most to lose from an upstart Messiah claiming divine authority, were quick to act against Jesus. As the story goes, they paid one of his apostles, Judas Iscariot, 30 pieces of silver to lead Jesus away from his crowds of followers so that he may be arrested. Jesus had supposedly seen all of this coming and made no effort to resist. And so, in the midnight hours after the Last Supper, Jesus was quietly apprehended and brought into the custody of the Jewish elders. The Jewish high priest convened a makeshift court that very same night, accusing Jesus of blasphemy and plotting to destroy the Holy Temple. The charges were seemingly easy to affirm. Claiming to be the Son of God would obviously be blasphemous if Jesus wasn't actually the Son of God. As for threatening the temple's destruction, Jesus had already caused a riot there by kicking out the money changers, so it wasn't a big assumption to make. In any case, Jesus made no attempt to defend himself during this expedited trial, and so he was found guilty before the break of dawn and sentenced to death. But the Jewish elders now faced a problem. Since Judea had been turned into a Roman province, the Jewish courts no longer had the authority to impose capital punishment. That right belonged to the Roman governor, the famously cleanly Pontius Pilate. As it so happened, Pilate was in Jerusalem at the time. Not by his own volition, of course, as the Romans generally hated Jerusalem and preferred to reside in the more Hellenistic cities along the coast, but by necessity he had to be there to maintain order during Passover. At dawn, the Jewish elders presented Jesus to Pilate and levied their charges. Initially, Pilate argued that the Jewish laws that Jesus had supposedly violated held no weight for capital punishment. After all, he governed a Roman province, so Jesus had to have violated Roman law. The Jewish elders quickly countered by bringing up Jesus' claim that he was not just the Messiah, but also the King of the Jews. Such a title, they argued, could be considered treason against the Roman Empire and an affront to the emperor, so Pilate couldn't ignore it. Yet Pilate was crafty, and he thought up another reason to avoid condemning Jesus. You see, Jesus hailed from Nazareth, which wasn't part of Judea proper, but rather of a region to the north called Galilee. Unlike Judea, Galilee hadn't been incorporated as a Roman province, and instead remained part of the kingdom of one of Herod the Great's sons, Herod Antipas. Since Jesus was a Galilean and not a Roman citizen, Pilate decreed that he should be sent to Galilee for judgment. Unfortunately for Jesus, Herod Antipas also happened to be in Jerusalem at the time, so Jesus was promptly dragged before him in the early hours of the morning. Antipas wisely avoided having anything to do with this whole mess. He had notably executed John the Baptist a few years earlier and suffered great religious unrest for it. So he deferred to Rome's judgment and sent Jesus back. Pilate now had no choice but to pass judgment upon Jesus, who again made no effort to defend himself. Reluctantly, Pilate found Jesus guilty of sedition against the Roman Empire, much to the delight of the Jewish elders and their bloodthirsty followers. As was the Roman custom, Jesus was crucified, and his crime was written out atop his cross. Now, from the point of view of the Jewish elites and Pilate himself, the crisis was resolved. Jerusalem survived Passover without a messianic revolt, and Jesus' disciples harmlessly scattered to the wind. Of course, whether Jesus was actually guilty depends on whether he really was the Son of God. If he was, then by definition, he couldn't blaspheme against himself. As for the sedition charge, Jesus claimed his kingdom was in heaven, which is a whole different plane of existence. So, depending on your theological point of view, his preaching couldn't be seditious either. But again, it all depends on what you believe. What we can confidently say is that had Jesus not been found guilty, the world would be a very different place, almost too hard to imagine. It's somewhat easier for us to imagine what the world would look like with more SideQuest subscribers, an enlightened utopia of peace and harmony. So spread the word of our humble little endeavour, and maybe even consider supporting us on Patreon. We promise that the next video is just around the corner, so stay tuned for the next divinely litigious episode of SideQuest. What car did Jesus drive? A Chrysler.